An article in the Jerusalem Post published on April 8, 2022 stated 40% of Americans see some prophetic significance to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. According to a new survey published by the Joshua Fund, when broken down by religion, 37% of Catholics, 54% of Protestants, and 70% of evangelical born-again Christians agree. This series will seek for a biblical answer to the question, is Russia's war against Ukraine a fulfillment of Ezekiel 38 and 39 about Gog and Magog? In part one of the series, let us look at the surrounding context of Ezekiel 38 and 39. This will deal with Ezekiel the man, Ezekiel the book, the historical context, the literary context, and so on. Let us begin by reading Ezekiel chapter 1, verses 1, 2, and 3. Now it came to pass in the 30th year, in the 4th month, in the 5th day of the month, as I was among the captives by the river Chebar, that the heavens were opened, and I saw visions of God. In the 5th day of the month, which was the 5th year of King Jehoiakim's captivity, the word of the Lord came expressly unto Ezekiel, the priest, the son of Buzi, in the land of the Chaldeans, by the river Chebar, and the hand of the Lord was there upon him. Ezekiel tells us that he was among the captives. By 612 BC, the Babylonians had gained control of all the Assyrian Empire. In 606 BC, Nebuchadnezzar led a military mission to Jerusalem and took Daniel and thousands of other favored young men as captives to Babylon. In 597 BC, Nebuchadnezzar captured and plundered Jerusalem and took King Jehoiakim and many upper-class citizens, including Ezekiel, to Babylonia. This was the second captivity. For several years, Daniel and Ezekiel were captives in Babylon at the same time, but the Bible does not tell us whether or not they knew each other. In 586 BC, King Zedekiah rebelled against Nebuchadnezzar. As a result, the city of Jerusalem, including the temple, was destroyed, and the king, along with many others, were taken to Babylon in the third captivity. After the first captivity, some of the captives went 13 years without hearing a message from a prophet of God. They may have thought that God had forsaken them, but in the 5th year after the second captivity, God would raise up a prophet among the captives themselves. The northern kingdom of Israel had gone into Assyrian captivity in 721 BC. About 100 years later, a son was born to Buzi. The child was named Ezekiel, which means God strengthens. Judah had become very weak and was in need of strengthening from God. At the age of 25, Ezekiel was taken from Jerusalem to Babylon as a captive. If he had not been in captivity, he would have begun his duties as a priest at the temple in Jerusalem at the age of 30. But instead, God called him to be a prophet. He was by descent a priest and by commission a prophet. So like Jeremiah and Zechariah, he was both a priest and a prophet. He prophesied as a captive for 22 years from 593 to 571 BC. He lived among the captives in Tel Aviv at the river Chebar, Ezekiel 3:15, probably in his own house, Jeremiah 29:5, with his wife. Ezekiel said, I sat where they sat, Ezekiel 3:15. When his wife died of a sudden sickness, God did not permit him to weep over her. This was a sign that Jerusalem was to be destroyed without weeping, Ezekiel 24:15. Now those in captivity had Ezekiel with them, and the Jews in Judah had Jeremiah with them. The prophet Jeremiah had tearfully pleaded with Judah to repent, but they would not do so. Then he pleaded with them to peacefully accept their judgment until God would restore them. Jeremiah's ministry was not in Babylon, but in the 4th year of Zedekiah's reign. Jeremiah sent a letter there by Sariah, Jeremiah 51:59. Since Zedekiah had replaced Jehoiakim as king, this would also have been the 4th year of Jehoiakim's and Ezekiel's captivity. So it was 1 year after this letter that Ezekiel began his prophetic ministry. Also, Jeremiah sent another letter, or possibly the same one, to the captives in Babylon, as recorded in the 29th chapter of Jeremiah. There are many similarities between Ezekiel and Jeremiah. Both prophesied about the same time. Both were of priestly descent. Both foretold the overthrow of the Jewish nation. Both rebuked, warned, and comforted the Jews. Both threatened the unfaithful shepherds. Both condemned the northern and southern kingdom, but prophesied that they would be reunited. Both compared the coming judgment with a boiling pot, and both represented the Messiah as a priest king. Ezekiel confirmed what Jeremiah had preached, even though one was at Babylon and the other at Jerusalem, and did not have the means to talk with each other. The structure of the book of Ezekiel may be divided into two main divisions by the announcement of the fall of Jerusalem in chapter 33. The first division deals mainly with punishments and threats. The second division offers comfort and encouragement. The text for our main theme in this series is Ezekiel 38 and 39, and therefore was written for comfort and encouragement. In the first division, Ezekiel rebukes Judah for having a rebellious spirit, worshiping idols, and believing the false prophets who were saying that God would not let Jerusalem fall to the Babylonians. He also announces coming judgment against several foreign countries. After the fall of Jerusalem, the people were in a state of despair. Ezekiel, in the second division of his book, comforts and encourages them with predictions of future deliverance. He prophesies of their return to Jerusalem. In the last 9 chapters, he describes a temple much more beautiful and glorious than the one which had been destroyed. He also prophesied that all their enemies would finally be destroyed. The style of the book of Ezekiel is characterized by visions, symbolical acts, allegories, and lamentations. 2 examples of his many visions are a divine throne chariot drawn by 4 living creatures, and of a valley of dry bones coming to life. One of his symbolical acts is laying on his left side for 390 days and 40 days on his right side, representing the number of years of the guilt of Israel and Judah. On another occasion, he shaved his head and beard and divided the hairs into 4 parts, one of which he burns, another which he strikes with the sword, another is scattered to the wind, and only the very smallest portion is tied in the hem of his garment, to picture how only a small remnant shall remain. In Ezekiel 37:15 and following, he unites 2 sticks into one to picture the future reunification of Israel and Judah. In one of his allegories, he wrote about 2 unfaithful sisters, representing Samaria and Jerusalem, and their infidelity to the Lord. He wrote a lamentation about a lioness whose young lions were caught in a trap and led away by nose rings. This represented kings Jehoahaz, Jehoiakim, and Zedekiah. Another lamentation is spoken over Tyre, which is compared to a proud ship. Compare Ezekiel 27:1 and following. And over Pharaoh of Egypt, who is pictured as a crocodile in the sea. Ezekiel 32:1 and following. Easton's Bible Dictionary states, symbols and allegories occupy a prominent place, give a dark, mysterious character to the prophecies of Ezekiel. It was because of this obscurity that the Jews forbade anyone to read it until he had attained the age of 30. One of the main challenges of interpreting Ezekiel 38 and 39 is an understanding of what is symbolic and what is literal. The chapters immediately before and after Ezekiel 38 and 39 should add to our understanding. For instance, the Valley of Dry Bones coming to life refers to the regathering of the Jews to their homeland, and this precedes Ezekiel 38 and 39. Chapters 40 through 48 predict a restoration of the temple and its worship after Ezekiel 38 and 39. So you see, a preview of the context is very important before we proceed to Ezekiel 38 and 39.